Ann Samoylov, and as I mentioned before, this is day one of my teaching tips for Pilates instructors. It is mostly for Pilates new instructors, but it's also good and it's fun to watch if you have been teaching for a while, just little reminders and things that come up, and I definitely want to hear from you as well. So at the end, wait for that information and then just let me know what you're going through as a teacher. Today I want to talk about some things that I learned my first year of teaching. And you know, the first year of teaching for people in the Physical Mind program, you're actually an apprentice more than anything, because you leave your certification course, you know, with your teacher's blessing, of course, to start teaching immediately. But then about a year later, you take the formal test out, and then that's when you actually become fully certified. So there are lots of things that you can learn that first year, you know, in addition to teaching the exercises properly and then doing them yourself and doing all the self-practice that goes along with that. Some of the things that I learned, really, the first thing I have to say is that you really should pick that first studio or the first client, but really that first studio that you work at very carefully. You know, don't be afraid to interview the studio just as that owner and that studio is going to be interviewing you. I would highly suggest talking to their instructors. If you know of any past instructors, I mean, in your town, in your area, the industry is probably fairly small, and even in Los Angeles, it's small enough so that word gets around about, you know, the better studios to work at. Not even as far as pay, because at the beginning, that really shouldn't be your focus per se, but making sure that it's the right place for you is really important. So you really need to ask other professionals in the area. Ask the person who certified you, your certifying teacher, for their advice based on your personality, because they're going to know things about other studios that you won't. And you may get a bunch of different offers, but you know, you really have to be aware that there are some negatives here and there, negative forces here and there, and you really need to go in there and make your own opinion of the place and find out what you can learn there over your first year. And you know, not that you have to stay there the entire year, but you should be aware that, you know, many studios do like to hire newly certified or newly, you know, released from their course instructors, you know, so they can pay them less than more experienced instructors. But what that leads to is a bunch of misleading, you might be asked to misrepresent yourself. And at the beginning, you know, and just in general, I personally don't like to operate that way. I like to be very honest and open, and I'm not ashamed to say if I'm a beginner at something or if I don't know something. And I think it's important to really, you know, have a high level of integrity at the beginning of your career, because that will carry you through and people will remember that. The second thing that I want to talk to you about is don't spread yourself too thin. One thing that I did was I ended up working, I think at one point, at 3 different studios, and they were all over town, my friend, you know, and it was crazy, and I had no choice but to slowly cut them down. And finally, I was at one place, I knew the owners, and it was a much healthier situation for me. And oddly enough, as soon as I kind of cut those other 2 out, I got pregnant, which led to a whole other series of life changes. That first year was very tough because I did take on 3 different studios in 3 different areas of town. And they were all like 25 minutes to 30 minutes away from each other, which was insane now that I think about that. So, you know, if you have to do that, you know, try to schedule them on different days so you really only go to one location each day. And, you know, if you're seeing home clients, try to see people in the same area on the same days. You don't have to be traipsing all over town or all over the city, as in my case. The other thing to remember is that you are a startup business, even as a Pilates instructor. Excuse me as I scroll down because I've kind of made notes, but I'm not really able to read them like a teleprompter. You're a startup business, you are still learning, and you need to get really clear about how much you can earn. And if you get a job, let's say at a big corporate gym that has, let's say, machine classes or mat classes or privates, because there are a bunch of gyms that do have those services for their clients, you'll be able to make some pretty stable income there, and you might even get insurance, but keep in mind that full-time 40 hours a week Pilates is a lot of Pilates to do, and it's difficult when you're first starting out to do that much, and you will burn out. And I've seen friends burn out because they were just working too many hours in a week, and sometimes even 30 hours is a lot, because if you're working with doing private sessions, 5 in a row, many clients tend to come in with, issues that they want to discuss with you other than their body. So you become kind of a psychiatrist as well, which isn't the easiest thing all the time. So if you are going to kind of pack your schedule like that, I suggest doing a few private, semi-privates, and then maybe a class, because a class is going to disperse it. You won't have to give people that, I'm so sorry this happened for you, and, dealing with someone's emotional problems. You can just get through the class and, and watch people's bodies, and just that's it. And that's really, I think that's one thing I didn't do. I did like chunks of private training, and I just was burnt out. I wasn't even doing 30 hours and I was already getting burnt out. So that's something to keep in mind as far as how you pace your day. The last thing that I want to remind you about that first year is that you are going to get very overwhelmed by, you might possibly get overwhelmed, maybe you won't, by a lot of different training styles, a lot of new material, a lot of different ways of teaching, and you need to just be aware that your training doesn't stop at the door, but you don't have to have information overload. When all else fails, and in fact you should try to do this as often as possible, go back to those basics with your clients, go back to the fundamentals, go back to the core of what you know, and give people that, and slowly add in variations and props and all that kind of stuff. But really, like when you feel like you're kind of getting out of control and you have too much material to share with people, go back to the basics. And then also, you still should be taking classes, and you still should go to workshops and be aware of who's online. And there's a lot of industry websites now which are great. And always keep your eyes open for these new ways to teach the material, but don't necessarily regurgitate it immediately. Keep these new ways coming in, these new streams of interest for you in Pilates, but don't forget why you got into this in the first place. That's something I talk about in my certification video, that you should have a very clear view of why you're teaching Pilates, because it will help you get through this first year. If your goal is to, help women who've been in car accidents, or help women who had difficult pregnancies, whatever the case is, or help breast cancer survivors, or keep your eye on your own prize, and you will make it through the year, and you will be a stronger teacher, and you'll be preparing yourself the whole year for that test out, if that's how your program is structured, like mine was. So those are my tips for today. Just first year teaching tips, and some of them are actually things that I have to remind myself of now when I take on new clients at new locations, when I accept classes that people ask me to teach. I have to really think, is this getting me to my final kind of goal? Is this part of my whole purpose of teaching Pilates? Have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow with another little tip.